What up, guys? I'm Pope, and this is my bro JT, and welcome to Crooked Paths. I would say probably our best attempt at putting together anything that could ever resemble a podcast.
For sure. We want to thank you guys for being a part of this journey with us. We hope that this space can provide you with a little bit of encouragement, and if you're able to connect the dots between our scattered thoughts, perhaps even find a little bit of inspiration.
Yeah, for sure. We want to thank Kyle Brown and KEB Corporation for all their support in this and providing us the opportunity and the platform. They're on all social media outlets. Like, follow, subscribe, share, whatever you need to do. Keep you informed with KEB Corporation and everything they have going on.
That's right. We're going to talk a lot about our life, what we're learning about our lives, and how we're trying to operate as human beings moving forward. One thing that's for sure is it's never going to be a straight line.
No, sir. It's always crooked.
It's always crooked. You got the contrast between the coffee and the wine. It is late enough for you to have wine. I'm not going to sit here and judge you acting like it's the morning.
I appreciate
I'm drinking coffee later than I normally would be.
Yeah, I get it, though.
Just a little tired, so you got to...
Busy week.
Makes
for a tired Saturday sometimes.
Yeah, thankful for it, though.
For sure. Well, see, that's key. I mean, it had so much to do this week. Busy, lots going on, and yet you still find gratitude where you can amongst the craziness that is life, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, doing this is something, because we talked a little bit about last time, you know, spending the time and the effort and the energy doing whatever it is that you want to do to lead you to wherever you want to go. Mm-hmm. And we didn't say that in so many terms, but, you know, this is something that we've been wanting to do. So, you know, just... It doesn't matter if I'm, you know, I'm a little tired or whatever. It's like, hey, I do want to film this. I want to talk about this. I want to have this conversation.
I mean, when you're tired, you still do things that you don't want to do.
True.
So why not do things that you want to do?
That's a
I
good
guess
point.
You know. So
and you know,
easier said than done. Always.
Definitely. I think there are a lot of things that are simple but not easy. Like the concept to understand is simple, but like the actual implementation of it is not easy. Because it requires us to be consistent and have that energy and that effort.
I mean, Einstein would say in theory and practice are the same, but in practice they're not, right? So like the idea comes easy, right?
Yeah, and it comes back to the thing where, you know, if you want to be someone who lives authentically, or, you know, your actions need, like, you have to do the action. You have to put the action in to back up whatever words you're saying or whatever you're desiring.
Well, I mean, that's where, and we were talking about authenticity. That's where the disconnect in that we've seen in our lives, in the world around us, like that's where we've seen is like most people, mostly ourselves, would say these things.
Well, I think it's, especially if you want to live your life in a way that interacts like vertically with yourself and horizontally with others, that there are certain things you have to do, that you have to bring to the table. And I think one of the things we've realized in talking about our own hypocrisy and how we want to live authentic lives and the personal ownership that we're trying to take is we've learned that the mindset that you bring to the table is critical.
Well, I mean, you have to, believe in yourself and your ability to either create the change or just ability to do anything. Like,
you got to have belief. Belief gets you halfway there.
Exactly. I mean, that's like one of my favorite quotes is just the whole idea that just thinking that you can do something puts you halfway towards accomplishing it. You've already overcome the, I can't do this. Like you've given yourself the permission and ability to whatever it means. Like some things are just like, I believe I can do it and you can do it immediately. Some things are like, I believe I can do it, but you understand like doing it might take time to learn, practice a certain skill, hone it in, all this kind of stuff. So
you just have to determine for yourself what it is that you want to do. And honestly, when it comes to the mindset, for us to combat the hypocrisy in our own lives, it's almost like we've had to rewire our brain to view things a different way.
Well, I mean,
to find the positive aspect of things, to adopt a growth mindset type of thing. And really, it all ties into where's your focus. Because what your focus is on is where you're headed. So like if you're driving, you're looking straight at the horizon, you're driving straight, no problem. But like you see something on the side of the road and you keep staring, you start rubbernecking or whatever they say when you're like looking at accidents on the interstate or whatever. Sometimes you veer off a little bit. You follow that way. So where your vision is, and I think your mindset and your vision go hand in hand because the vision is where you set yourself where you want to go. And the mindset is almost this framework that you're choosing to live by to achieve that.
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about good and evil, right? I think it's really easy to get bogged down in the details of the negative. Like the negative stuff will always be there. There will always be burdens. There will always be expectations. There will always be inevitable life events, or change, comparison, those types of things. If we choose to focus on the negative aspects of our day tends to be less energizing, less like you're not really able to accomplish as much in a day. You feel like, because you feel like you've been like,
well, you almost feel more like you're catching up because you're mentally exhausted to where you think you convince yourself that physically you can't even do the things that you want to do.
I mean, and it comes down to, we talk about it a lot, just lenses in general. Like, how are you choosing to see the situation where you are right now? Are you in a present type vision? And we can talk about being present like so much, just the whole idea of, are you worrying too much about future events, past events? Like those things can help shape your vision in the present.
Well, and it's interesting because you said being present. The whole concept, like if I'm going to take ownership of my life, then I have to take ownership of this moment, which means mentally, emotionally, physically, I have to be present in the moment. Mm-hmm. So if we're gonna talk about mindset and this mental aspect of being present gives me an opportunity to be more conscious about, hey, you need to respond this way because this is what you want. If I'm just going through the motions of life and like not really staying present with who I am and being mindful about what I'm doing in that moment, then it's all what's the word I'm looking for? Like the habits, the reflexes that you'll do won't always be in alignment with what it is that you're trying to achieve internally. Because again, it's that rewiring. Until they become habit, until they become second nature to you, we are going to have to combat the hypocrisy in our own life, the things that made us be that passive passenger instead of that active person.
Well, when you get overwhelmed, you tend to just like, it's going back to losing your focus. You get overwhelmed, you have these gut reactions. And we've been like, I mean, in our experience, hardwired to have, you can get angrier quicker, or you can get frustrated or impatient or whatever it may be. But when you're not recognizing, knowing your body and knowing when those emotions are starting to arise, like recognizing that's part of your human experience.
And you're allowed to experience those emotions.
But it's the whole idea of like in the most constructive way. And that takes figuring it out for yourself.
Yeah, bro.
You know what I mean?
Define that.
I mean, mostly life is about self-discovery, and then everything else is almost like peripheral benefits, in my opinion, right? So like you've got to spend the time to recognize how you work.
The big aspect between the peripheral benefits and the self-discovery is, what are you going to do between the self-discovery and to achieve those peripheral benefits? Because it's not just like, all right, I've had this self-discovery, this is just going to happen. No, we have to be intentional with building the mindset, choosing the lens. And if you're going to, I think it's vital for us to continue to have multiple lenses that we can view things from, because that we have to expand our perspective.
Oh, I mean, I think absolutely. I mean,
perspective is going to breed patience. It's going to give you opportunities to do that type of stuff. But if I'm only going to look at something through a specific lens, when certain things don't look a certain way or come at me in a different way, if I'm not willing to look at it from a different perspective, I'm not going to be able to adapt and change and do the things that I need to do.
You kind of dismiss them almost. It's like, oh, they don't fit through this narrative. No, when you have to be like, well, maybe. You have to leave that option open to look at it from a different vantage point. See a problem, the shadows on a different side if you're looking from a different point of view.
What's crazy, you can look at something from one way and view one side as a hero, one side as a villain, but then if you look at something from that other person's perspective, they're the hero and then you're the villain or whatever.
What is it like? We lack context
all the time.
Stories, and we leave it up to assumptions and stuff. And that, if we're choosing to look at life in a negative, in a critical, in a judgmental way, we'll get bogged down in those things because we start to assume that we know how people will respond. Even if we know people, like I know you, right? But I can't sit here and expect that I know exactly how you'll respond in every situation. I've seen a lot more than maybe other people.
And think of how much we know each other, and yet still we can make assumptions that could be completely wrong.
And,
for me, I think assumptions were a root part of my hypocrisy, because I was not willing to have the communication to find out if that assumption, to investigate that assumption, or assumptions kind of forced me to act a certain way, and thus almost put up these shields and things, like a chameleon kind of thing. Like I would change with the circumstance because I would assume on circumstances instead of having the courage to have the communication to find out what's going on so that I can authentically operate.
Well, that's the key. You said courage, right?
Yeah.
You've got to get real vulnerable to now find out someone's vantage point add the context from someone else's perspective and like through their story and like their experience of it. Like, who am I to tell someone what they experienced in something? We've become too mob mentality on that kind of idea that we're like, if something happens this way, like just a blanket. I'm trying to think of a good example, but just like we broad brush everything and then we get mad at people who broad brush. Like, we can't do that.
Well, I mean, because definitely for me, I would talk out of both sides of my mouth. It was almost, and you know, just a quick point on the hypocrisy. I would be loudest about my hypocrisy or about others' hypocrisy when it was loudest in my life.
That's deflection too.
Yeah. And it was also part of just this framework, the lens that I was doing, this lens that I'm right, the way that I'm living is the right way. And it's like, yo, I can determine what it is that I want to, how I want to live my life. But one of the things I'm convinced of is like, I can be wrong and I'm cool with that.
Well, it's like Jason Petty. I'm smart enough to know that I don't know that much. Like, the whole idea is like, man, on the scale of knowledge and what's out there in the world and what people have spent time on and experiences and stuff.
Even with all the things that science has learned.
Exactly. You don't know anything except for what is based on your human experience. And even then, you're looking at it through your, like you said, your selfish lens of like, whether I'm right or this is how I saw the situation, when someone else could see it totally different, when intent could be totally different. Like, we're jumping to conclusions because we are so inundated with the bad. Like you said, we're so aware of all the bad that's happening in the world. Like, it can really affect us. And then not only that, man, life is hard. Oh my gosh,
yeah,
man.
It has its
you
own
lose loved ones.
Ups and downs.
You have absolutely unfair things that come your way and like changes
that are out of your control.
Exactly. Like, there are so many things that can bog you down. But you've got to be able to try to find, and like, people are like, oh, it's too cliche to find silver linings. Like, to me, cliche is like, the reason they are cliches is because like, man, listen to what they're saying. It's about the wisdom that's coming from those words.
It's not even about the silver lining for me. It's almost like what I've learned. If I'm going to be in a forward leaning type of posture for my life, if that's how I'm going to combat my hypocrisy by trying to be present and do the things, the habits that I want to build, I have to be intentional with being positive. And it doesn't mean that every situation that comes my way is great, but I try to find the positive in it, because what I've learned in my life internally, when I stay grateful, when I find the positive, I'm more attentive to opportunities in those moments to learn, to grow, to move forward, instead of getting bogged down. Because again, it all tied into that like self-defeating cycle. I would start to get on this, doing the right habits, having the right mindset, doing the things that I want to do. And then something would happen that was out of my control. And then I would just get in this mode, just like, this always happens to me, or what's going on here? I'm not going to achieve what I want to achieve. And then I would stew in it and not do what I was want to do, not continue down the path that I was forging.
It's like the whole idea of like words, right? Like, words bring life or death. Absolutely. And if you're continually telling yourself these things, I'm not saying like you're bringing negative things on. You're just more you're more attentive to
recognizing
aware
about it,
instead of trying to find.
What's the thing that propaganda says? If every place on your body that you touch hurts, then your finger's broken.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole idea of like, you have no idea, like, this long term, like, a bad thing that happened 15 years ago could have been like the catalyst to some amazing event down the road that in that moment you couldn't see. In that moment, it was like, there's no way you can tell me this is going to end up good.
So you were telling me that little like parable or something from the Solve for Happy book about the kid.
It's called the Boy and the Black Arabian Horse or something like that. And it's just the whole idea of like, he was in the desert and a wild black Arabian horse came up and he like was able to like get it and tame it. And the whole like town was like, goes to the kid's father, like, your son's so lucky. And then like this guy's like riding the horse and falls off and breaks his legs. And they were like, your son's so unlucky. And like each time the father's like, well, I understand, like, yeah, like, you know, what is, it's almost like maktub, you know what I mean? Like, that's what in The Alchemist is just like, it is written, like, what's going to happen. But then he breaks his legs and the next day, their like country goes to war and all young, capable men are getting called in to fight a war, and now his son doesn't have to go because he broke his leg. So like the father was basically,
your son's so lucky.
Your son's so lucky. So the whole idea is like, you can keep going from this unlucky to lucky side, but then ultimately you can't tell really in that moment what might be a grander scale
Yeah, we view time
or, yeah.
linearly, right? Like we only
Right.
can view time as it comes
In
at us,
that moment.
But we'll never but until we get to the future point. If we get to that future point, we can look back and then say,
Like-
what, hindsight's always 20/20 or
Always,
whatever.
yeah.
But for me, it all starts, or it always goes back to that lens. How am I viewing? Where's my vision at? And what am I doing to try to continue to build that vision?
And how you're looking at the situation. Exactly. Like, I mean,
how am I viewing myself? How am I viewing others? What am I viewing challenges as learning opportunities, as growing opportunities, or am I complaining and finding myself stewing in that?
it's also like the suffering you put yourself through before even like events. Like life events happen and they're tough, and like you're gonna, like, breaking your legs, right? You'll feel physical pain in that moment. Like you'll have uncomfortable, like
Right.
definite events that are feelings and emotions that are tough to go through. But ultimately, like, you create more suffering if you were just like expecting it. Like this person, like, say in the
Well, it's
example-
like if you're worrying about it the whole time, then not only did you have to deal with it when it happened, but all the worry that you had before, you were also causing
you're-
yourself
exactly.
that
It's almost
kind
like
of
mental reps.
Yep.
Like you can, your brain thinking about something can, like, it almost is the same thing that if your body went through the action, right? It's the same type of brain waves that are going through. It's like
well, that's how powerful the mind is.
Well, right. So like think about those types of mental reps. If you're just like, you're creating a suffering cycle, then now every event that's happening to you, it's like, oh, if you had a
develop
job
this lens, you're looking at it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's all about the perspective that you look at it. Like think about if you had a job interview coming up and you're nervous about it, you're building up all this kind of thing. You're like, well, they're going to ask this kind of question, or a test. Tests are like the easiest thing, man. The whole idea of standardized, like, people like build up so much pressure on these, like, you know, the results of these tests, and they end up making it harder for themselves to be successful because they're worrying up until they have more suffering than the bad event actually is even bad.
And I think we learned that in our own experience. In the times that we gave ourselves the freedom to not worry and let whatever happened, we would be more intentional with our preparation for, hey, I'm going to put in the work, and then whatever happens. But then the other times where we would worry and stress and fear, we'd be defeated before we even got to the battle.
Well, you have no energy.
You have no energy because you've just been toiling over that. And like I used to, because like my only enemy is me, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
So like if I was having to beat myself mentally, I was going to have to overcome myself mentally before I even got to the battles that the day faces.
Yeah.
But I'm exhausted. So again, it ties back into how am I viewing myself? What type of mindset am I bringing? Because thoughts, words, actions. Every ideas are birthed in the mind. Where you're going, you can see visions for your life that way. They start here, and it's this incredible muscle. I know it's an organ, but it's this incredible muscle, and we have to be intentional about training it and building the pathways that allow for us to view ourselves in a positive light, to view where we're going in a positive light, to find the gratitude, to find the opportunity in a situation. And that doesn't mean that you can't feel the bad emotions, feel the stress or the anger or even the anxiety, but knowing that those things don't dictate your value, because you're able to have that perspective where, hey, but I know how I view myself. I know where I'm trying to go. I know where my vision's heading.
I think knowing that those things, like the stress and those types of things, those are inevitable. So learning in life how to be successful, however you define it, despite those things, like in spite of those things.
What's successful for yourself? Define the success for yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, what does that mean to be like successful for you?
The baseline gratitude, and then, because if you're happy, regardless of what's going, I mean, we're both in jobs right now that we definitely don't want to do for the rest of our lives, right? But it's like, how do I approach each day in a thankful way? So like, that way you're
how
not
do I
just like,
do well? How
exactly.
do I give the right effort and those
what
types of things?
What can I learn here? Who can I being present in this moment instead of like dreading the fact that you're here, wanting to be somewhere else, but instead of actually spending time to try to get yourself to somewhere else. This is where we find ourselves, at least myself, a lot. It's like, oh, I want to do all these different things, but like, man, my day is done. I'm checked out. I come home, chill, cut on a show, eat dinner, whatever. And then like, it's just like
next thing I know is
a couple hours to go to bed.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And then I'll go to bed and maybe tomorrow I'll be better. And that whole idea, but it's also recognizing like, if you look at each day through the lens of, I mean, the way we operate, loving God, loving people.
Right.
That's what we want to try to do. Right. And I think you can learn in terms of loving God in a way that's like, you learn that by loving people. Like,
they go hand in hand. It's
do.
almost like you can't love God without loving people, and you can't love people without loving God.
And so I think for the most part, you know, you have to be willing, man, like every morning waking up and putting on like, this is like, okay, so we went through an exercise with our boy Mike, right? And it's just, right, I wrote down like 27 little like 1 or 2 line like sentences, or not even sentences, just
almost
words.
like a creed for yourself.
Like, and if I read that every morning, this is the baseline of how I want to look at my day. And it's a bunch of reminders that I've learned over my 30 years of being here, and even I want to say probably less than that, because, you know, I was still a kid. I was so naive in my, I mean, I still am, but I choose to be ignorant at this point because like I get so bogged down by everything. And you know, take it or leave it.
But it's setting your course each day. And that's, for me, I need to every day remind myself of the battles that I've won, of the things that have gone, the growth that I've had, so that I don't get derailed, because there's so much coming at me in my life, and everybody really, just with everything going on, that it's so easy to get lost in the sauce, right?
Oh yeah.
Your mind gets caught up in all these different avenues and all this type of stuff, and you forget about the fact that I'm trying to stay present in this moment.
Yep.
I'm trying to be intentional in this moment to grow, because what I've learned is when I'm present in the moment, it gives me an opportunity to live authentically.
Right.
And if I live authentically in that moment, then future moments are able to be lived more authentically because I lived authentically in that moment.
And I quote The Alchemist constantly because it's probably
it's
my all-time favorite book. Like it is. And they talk about the whole idea of change, and like you can get so caught up in worrying about change in the future, but if you can just change in the present moment, future moments of change end up being easier because you're in your current moment, you're
willing
engaging change.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be. And it's a process, right? It's always been a process. It's a journey, whatever kind of like term you want to use for something long-term, right? Whatever you want to say, ultimately it comes down to recognizing that you got to start by learning about yourself, spending time with yourself, whatever that may be, finding the things that you
determining
love,
what you want,
defining your life in that way, stripping away. It's like the whole idea of like just stripping away everything,
expectations,
exactly, everything like that. And so it's you move forward, and it takes time, and that's, I mean, patience is absolutely key. Consistency is key. All of that. So. I mean, and these are,
and it starts in the mind.
Right.
Everything starts in your mind.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like these aren't new things.
Nothing new under the sun.
That's what's awesome is like, man, people throughout history have known how to exist in this life. There are at least stories and
the history that's been told to us.
Exactly. Through the history that's been told us of people finding joy in this life, in their existence for however long it is. All right. And so recognizing that we've noticed, or at least I've noticed, that so much negative is out there. The negative story of humanity is continually told. I want to try to focus on the good parts and like how we actually can be better just as people.
So Mike sent me this video, and the guy basically was talking about like, what inputs are you giving yourself for your mind to do what it's doing? It's like, so we can get bogged down by all the negative, and listen, stay informed if you want to stay informed, read stuff, find out what's going on in the world, whatever, but don't let the things outside of your control dictate, number one, how you view yourself, and number two, how you view how you're implementing your life path, whatever that means for yourself. And there's levels to it. Some people are able to like see what they want and immediately jump into doing that. Man, I feel like this has been like a crawling process, even for the last 7 years, but it's almost been a complete restructuring of how, number one, I view myself, where I want to go with my life, but also just deconstructing the versions of myself that I had built up to fit into this circumstance or this relationship or this friend group or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately is giving yourself permission. And that can take so much time to get to the point where you're like, hey, I'm willing to be vulnerable, show many of my flaws. I'm willing to go do this, giving yourself permission to be uncomfortable. And then, I mean, you'll find freedom in that. I mean, and fear is a big aspect of that, because like fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear is
in the mind.
Exactly.
The mind likes to operate within the known.
Yep.
So we have to be intentional about building the pathways into the unknown, like to give ourselves the courage and the strength to just step out.
And also recognizing like how biologically we are wired as humanity has progressed over time, especially when it comes to empires and just like ways of life and everything like that.
Civilization.
Saul for Happy talks about I mean, like we have this fight or flight response, right? And I think you're hardwired to be like, there's a noise over here. I need to be careful. That could be a tiger. And then like you had to assume tiger because the second you don't,
you're
done.
Then, you're done. Right?
It could just be a flock of birds in a bush. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like it's the whole idea of like we've got these things that we're hardwired in, and we use those responses differently. So recognizing how they affect you, and like recognizing how we allow fear to go to this level when like we live in a world, or at least in a society, where we don't necessarily have to worry about random wild animals attacking us.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. I mean, it's just so the whole idea, the whole point of bringing that up was just like, hey, we're hardwired to allow the hesitancy
to survive,
to protect. It's a survival. Yeah. Exactly. That's the word.
You want to protect yourself. You want, because ultimately, like, you want to exist. The human body, the human psyche wants to continue to exist for however long it has. And to get to the path of, or to forge the path of ownership for myself, once I recognized I have to combat my hypocrisy, I have to be intentional with doing something different. I recognized that the way that I was viewing things, the mindset that I was bringing to things, was having a major impact on why I was acting the way, a certain way, that I was acting, or not living in alignment with what I wanted. So I've had to be intentional with reminding myself of what I've been through, what I've grown through, finding gratitude for the things that I have in my hands and what I've experienced. I'm trying to be more intentional with not comparing myself to where I thought I should be by this point, or what I wanted. Especially, bro, I thought I'd be so many different places by the time I turned 30. Right. And now now that I'm here, I'm so thankful for where I'm at, because I don't think if it was for everything that I've experienced, that I wouldn't be having the realizations that I'm having about myself now.
I always would feel
viewing myself in that way and wanting to have the right mindset.
Right. Like almost like, oh man, if I could just go back there, but I want the way that I'm thinking now. And it's like, well, you wouldn't be the way that you're thinking now if it weren't for those.
They go hand in hand. And we can spend time looking on the past. We can spend time worrying about the future, or we can be intentional about being present. And if we're honest, the present moment is the only thing that we are promised.
I mean, absolutely.
Right here in this moment is the only thing that we're promised. We could later today be going somewhere and our car get hit, and it could be it.
Yeah, I mean,
so I could worry about the future. I could be upset and regret about the past, or I can say, hey, what do I want out of this life? Mm-hmm. What do I see for myself, and what can I do in this moment right now to build towards that?
And it comes down to how you're seeing this moment.
Right.
Like,
is it an opportunity?
Are you seeing it as in a building type of way, or in a tearing down type of way? Because that's kind of honestly what positive and negative thoughts are.
Right.
To me, positive thoughts are more of a building. Like even in failure, even in things that some would consider like bad.
Bro, you can change the lens on something, and it completely drastically changes the entire experience.
You're close up on something. You're only seeing it from this perspective. The second you come out there, it's like, oh, whoa, there were, like if you're looking at a drawing and you're focused in on one thing, you zoom out a little bit, all of a sudden there's like 10 other things happening around it. This Solve for Happy, I don't know why I pointed there, because it was on the table last time, but just the whole idea of, there was a picture of two kids. One was like stealing the backpack, and one was like running out into the street, and there was a car right there, and it was like, what do you think's about to happen? Then it shows the next thing. That car is parked at a meter. There was a cross guard who was telling the kids to run across the street. It looked like these kids were about to get hit by a car, but like it was like, you have no idea what, like you need to remove yourself from being so close to the situation. So, I mean, perspective and lens is everything. You like really recognizing that while your existence, you in this world means a lot, because ultimately like you have to live in it.
Only you can live your life.
But you got to recognize like you are one in a billion, in this existence, like trying to figure it out in this world. So like you're special, but also like very common.
Well, I think that the dichotomy of it is so intriguing to me, because it's like in the grand scheme of the universe, like we're a speck, but from our perspective, the world revolves around us.
We're the center.
So like there's this,
we're the center of the universe.
So for me, I've got to be intentional with how I'm viewing things, giving myself grace and viewing things in a learning posture, instead of being harping on the fact that I didn't do something in a moment that's already passed. And I think you can't move forward looking back.
Right. And I think a combination of your experiences, like how you're viewing your experiences, past, present, future, how you view those, and also things that are happening around you. Like ultimately for me, why it's hard to look at any kind of news is because it's just like bad thing after another, bad thing after another. And I almost like, I just live in a world where like, I know that's going to happen. Doesn't make it any less impactful on the world, but like, I know bad things are going to continue to happen because they've happened since the beginning of time.
Yeah, and we can't. What we're learning is we can't allow those things to be points where we stay spinning on the frustration instead of staying active and present in the moments that are coming at us.
Exactly.
To do whatever change we want to change in our lives to maybe one day down the road impact this thing that we don't like.
Move the needle in our lives so that maybe we can meet other people who are moving, and then all of a sudden you've got like 1, 2, 3. Now you've got a group, and like,
play your part.
Exactly.
Be the part of the body, whatever part of the body you are. Doing your things, playing your role, contributing to society, and whatever that looks like for you. And ultimately controlling things that you can control, viewing the things in a way that allow you to move wherever it is you're trying to go, because you determine the vision you want for your life. You determine the lens you look through things with, and you determine if you're going to choose to be consistent and stay present.
Exactly. Show yourself respect, show others respect, ask for forgiveness when you've messed up. Like honestly, if you're circling around those things, you're moving in the direction.
You're moving forward. You're crawling. You're walking. You're moving things. And we don't have to, it's not going to happen overnight.
No.
It just takes time. It always is going to be about beginning with the end in mind. Stephen Covey has this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it says, begin with the end in mind. So have an idea of where you're going. And when I say that, don't think, well, I have to determine what I'm going to do the rest of my life. No. Hey, for this next month, I want to get here. All right. I'm going to set my sights on that, my focus on that, my vision on that. My mindset is going to be, hey, I gotta stay present. I want to learn from my past, but I don't want to stay focused on my past. I want to be intentional about that and continue to build the mindset that I'm growing, that I'm learning these opportunities. I want to view myself from the lens that I matter, that I'm valued, and I have value, so that allows me to just continue to build. And like you said, future moments, you can grow in future moments if you grow in this moment right here.
And then understanding that like, it's not like just because you have the end in mind, don't think that you know how it's going to go.
No. But that's why you do one step at a time, one day at a time. You continue to work, you continue to build. You look back and you'll see this incredible path that you forged.
Right.
But in order to take ownership of your life, it starts in your mind. And that's what we've learned for ourselves. It starts in our mind, the way that I view myself, the way that I view the day in front of me, the way that I view the task. Even though there's things that I don't necessarily want to do in my day, I still have to do them. The way that I carry myself through that, it's all about the lenses. It's all about the mindset. It's about giving myself that space to experience life in that way.
Definitely.
And like we said, it's never going to be an overnight thing.
Nope.
It's going to be day in and day out, being consistent, being intentional. That's how you build that mindset. That's how you build those habits. And it's never going to be a straight line.
No, it's always crooked.